Hello everyone, in this video we'll be dealing with anatomy of nose. So today we'll be discussing about the nasal septum and the lateral wall of the nose. And under nasal septum we'll further discuss about its formation, blood supply and its nerve supply. So nasal septum is formed by two parts. The perpendicular plate of ethmoid and vomer are the principal bones in the formation of nasal septum. Nasal bone, hard palate and maxilla are the accessory bones. Septal cartilage also helps in its formation. Moving on to the arterial supply of nasal septum, it is divided into four quadrants: the anterior superior, anterior inferior, posterior superior and posterior inferior quadrant. The anterior superior region is supplied by the anterior ethmoidal artery, while the anterior inferior part is supplied by the branch of facial artery. The posterior inferior region is supplied by the sphenopalatine and greater palatine artery. Its venous drainage is via facial vein and pterygoid venous plexus. The nerve supply is via the following: olfactory nerves. Anterior superior part is supplied by the anterior ethmoidal nerve. Anterior inferior part is supplied by the anterior superior alveolar nerve, and the posterior part is supplied by the pterygopalatine ganglion. Now let's discuss about the lateral wall of nose. So this lateral wall is formed by a number of bones and cartilages. The bones are the nasal bone, frontal process of maxilla, lacrimal bone, the superior, middle and inferior concavs, perpendicular plate of palatine, and the medial pterygoid plate. The cartilages forming the lateral wall are the upper and lower nasal cartilages. Moving on to its features, the lateral wall is divided into three areas. The anterior part is known as the vestibule. It is lined by the skin containing vimbrisae, which are the short curved hair. The middle part is known as the atrium of middle meatus. The posterior part contains three curved bony projections called the superior, middle and inferior concavs. The spaces between these concavs are the meatus, hence the superior, middle and inferior meatus. Furthermore, the middle meatus contains two features. One is the ethmoidal bulla, which is a round elevation produced by the middle ethmoidal sinus present below it. Second is the hiatus semilunaris, which is a deep semicircular sulcus present below the bulla ethmoidalis. So the lateral wall has number of openings, which are the following: the opening of sphenoidal air sinuses into the sphenoethmoidal recess. Sphenoethmoidal recess is a triangular depression present below the superior concha. The opening of posterior ethmoidal sinus into the superior meatus. The opening of middle ethmoidal air sinus into the ethmoidal bulla. In the anterior part of hiatus semilunaris is the opening of frontal air sinus. In its middle part is the opening of anterior ethmoidal air sinus, and in its posterior part is the opening of maxillary air sinus. And lastly is the opening of nasolacrimal duct into the inferior meatus. Now we move on to its lining. The vestibule is lined by the skin. The olfactory region is lined by the olfactory epithelium, and the respiratory region is lined by the respiratory epithelium. Next is its arterial supply. The anterior superior quadrant is by the anterior ethmoidal artery. The anterior inferior quadrant is by the branches of facial artery and greater palatine artery. Posterior superior quadrant is by the sphenopalatine artery, and the posterior inferior quadrant is by the branches of greater palatine artery. Its venous drainage is similar to the venous drainage of nasal septum, that is the facial vein and the pterygoid venous plexus. Its lymphatic drainage is via submandibular lymph node and retropharyngeal lymph nodes. Its nerve supply is similar to the nerve supply of nasal septum. It is supplied via olfactory nerves, anterior superior quadrant by the anterior ethmoidal nerve, anterior inferior quadrant by the anterior superior alveolar nerve, and the posterior quadrant by the pterygopalatine ganglion. So this brings me to the end of my video. If you do find this useful, do like, share and subscribe. See you in the next video.